You think you can just walk away from me? After everything I've done, you're nothing without me.
Nothing without you. Funny, I think the world finally saw who's truly nothing here.
You fat, controlling idiot! I've wasted 19 years being a prisoner, and now you can chalk on how I fed me!
The courtroom was silent, yet every camera lens seemed to hum with anticipation, capturing a moment no one in that room would ever forget. Richard Bennett, a 52-year-old corporate titan whose life had been built on control and precision, stood at the center of the chaos that he himself had created. His finger jabbed toward his 19-year-old daughter, Emily, a young woman who had spent nearly 2 decades living under his shadow. His expression was a storm of indignation and entitlement as he proclaimed to Judge Judy and the millions watching from their homes that Emily had gone astray, ungrateful and disrespectful, and that she needed to be corrected. From the first second, it was obvious to everyone present that this would not be a routine case. The tension was palpable, like the charged air before a thunderstorm. What was supposed to be a simple monetary dispute had the potential to become something far more explosive, the unraveling of a carefully curated facade. A man exposed for the toxic control he had disguised as parental guidance. Richard had prepared meticulously for this day, dressed in a tailored suit that screamed wealth and authority. He carried a leather folder filled with what he considered indisputable proof documents he believed would vindicate him and publicly humiliate his daughter. In his mind, he was a hero of parenting, a man brave enough to confront a daughter who had dared defy him. He believed he would emerge from that courtroom victorious, the enforcer of family discipline, and the embodiment of parental wisdom. What he did not know was that Emily had been preparing too, but in a very different way. For the past 2 years, she had documented everything. Text messages dripping with manipulation, phone calls laced with threats, every gift weaponized as a tool of control. Her evidence wasn't just a defense. It was a revelation. She had come to court with the truth in her hands, ready to expose the reality that no amount of money or status could mask. Her father was not merely strict. He was a narcissistic manipulator, a man who measured love in transactions rather than affection. Judge Judy sat poised on the bench, her gaze razor-sharp, the culmination of decades spent dissecting family dynamics. In the first 30 seconds of the proceeding, she could see everything Richard thought he was hiding. His careful control, his entitled language, the subtle cues of intimidation, they were all visible to her trained eye. The real question was not whether Emily could prove her innocence. It was how publicly devastating the revelation would be. On paper, the case seemed simple. Richard was suing Emily for $15,000, claiming repayment for years of financial support. There were invoices, $5,000 for the car he had gifted her on her 16th birthday, $3,000 for graduation presents, $2,000 for various holiday gifts, and $5,000 for miscellaneous expenses. But those numbers were a smokescreen. Anyone watching closely could see that this wasn't about money, it was about power. About asserting dominance over a young woman who had finally dared to live for herself. Emily's appearance betrayed both fear and determination. She was small in stature, clutching her own folder of evidence like a lifeline, yet there was a quiet fire behind her eyes. For months, she had been living on her own, juggling college and part-time jobs, finally free from the suffocating grip of a father who had dictated her every move for 19 years. Every friendship monitored, every hour accounted for, every gift accompanied by strings and obligations. Richard's generosity had always come with hidden chains, and Emily had spent years learning how to navigate them until she met Jake, a 22-year-old with nothing but kindness and patience, had shown Emily a life that wasn't governed by fear. He treated her as an equal, listening to her dreams rather than trying to reshape them. And when she chose independence, her father's reaction was immediate, merciless, and predictable. He cut her off financially and brought this lawsuit claiming betrayal, disrespect, and financial loss. Richard began his opening statement with the confidence of a man who believed the world would side with him. "Your Honor, I have given this girl everything," he said, voice firm, gesturing dismissively at Emily. "The finest education, the opportunities I never had, a life of comfort and advantage. All I ever asked in return was respect and gratitude. Instead, she abandoned her family for a boy she barely knows, sneaking out in the middle of the night, disregarding every lesson I tried to instill. Asterisk, the courtroom held its breath. Judge Judy, expression unreadable, leaned forward slightly. Every word, every gesture, every assumption about parenting was being cataloged, analyzed, and stored for her ultimate judgment. She noted the repeated phrasing, "my daughter," instead of Emily, the implication that his child was property rather than a person. She saw the condescension, the expectation of obedience masquerading as guidance. The thin veneer of reasoned concern was beginning to crack. Richard continued, elaborating on the itemized list of so-called loans. He pulled each document with dramatic precision, hoping the audience and judge alike would see him as both rational and wronged. The car I gave her at 16, $5,000, her high school graduation gift, $3,000, holidays, emergency funds, every assistance provided. She promised to pay it back. Yet she turns away from her family, choosing this boy, this Jake, and suddenly I am the villain. Judge Judy raised a single eyebrow at the word promised, signaling that she had already seen the flaw in his argument. "Mr. Bennett," she began, her voice calm but piercing, "did you explicitly tell your daughter these were loans? That she was required to repay them with interest?" Richard faltered. "Well, not in so many words. But there's an understanding between parent and child. When you invest in someone's future, there's an expectation of respect, obedience, and recognition of the sacrifices made." The courtroom was silent. Richard had just admitted on national television that he viewed his relationship with his daughter as a transaction, not a bond of love. Judge Judy's eyes narrowed imperceptibly, her mind racing through decades of similar cases. "The unraveling had begun, Mr. Bennett," she said, her tone measured but cutting. "Let me make sure I understand. You claim that presents, holidays, and birthday gifts were actually loans, and that she was obliged to repay them, not in money alone, but in loyalty and obedience?" Richard's frustration surfaced, his voice rising. "Your Honor, parenting is about responsibility, accountability. These children today entitled, spoiled, they think respect is optional. My daughter must learn the consequences of her choices. She can't just walk away because some boy told her she could." His tirade, aimed at Emily, crossed a line. Judge Judy's next move would shift the balance entirely. She turned her gaze from Richard to Emily, a flicker of empathy softening her otherwise unyielding expression. "Miss Bennett," she said, voice gentle yet commanding, "do you have something to share regarding these so-called loans?" Emily's hands trembled as she opened her folder. Her voice was soft at first, barely above a whisper. "Your Honor, they were gifts. I have proof." Richard's reaction was immediate, explosive. "She's lying. That boyfriend has manipulated her. This is exactly the disrespect I've been warning about." Judge Judy's hand rose in that iconic gesture, silencing him instantly. "Sit down, Mr. Bennett. I am speaking to your daughter. You will wait your turn." For the first time in the proceedings, the courtroom shifted. Richard's control had slipped. Emily began presenting her evidence: text messages, birthday cards, and phone recordings. Each piece dismantling the narrative he had so meticulously built out, and in that instant, it became clear: the carefully constructed empire of Richard Bennett, the man who thought he could command obedience through fear and financial leverage, was about to collapse. Asterisk. Emily's hand shook as she began presenting her first piece of evidence. But with every page she turned, her confidence grew. The courtroom leaned in, sensing the shift in momentum. No longer was this simply a legal dispute over money. It was a confrontation with years of manipulation, control, and emotional abuse. Judge Judy's eyes never left Emily, her gaze steady and penetrating, signaling to the young woman that this was her moment to speak and be heard. The first item was a birthday card from Richard to Emily on her 16th birthday. Judge Judy read it aloud, her voice carrying through the hushed courtroom. "To my beautiful daughter on your sweet 16. This car is yours. No strings attached. May it take you wherever you dream of going. Love, Dad. Asterisk, a stunned silence fell. The audience exchanged glances, realizing that Richard's argument, $5,000 loan disguised as a gift, was already crumbling. Richard's face, once flushed with the confidence of a man certain of victory, paled. He opened his mouth, but Judge Judy's next words cut him off before he could speak. Mr. Bennett, how does a gift explicitly labeled "no strings attached" suddenly become a debt? Richard hesitated, searching for a plausible answer, but none existed. Well, Your Honor, circumstances change. She chose to move out, and his voice faltered. He was grasping at excuses, yet the courtroom had already seen through the cracks in his narrative. Emily moved on to the next piece of evidence, a series of text messages Richard had sent her in the weeks after she moved out. The messages were alarming. If you don't come home right now and apologize, I will destroy you financially. You have nothing without me. I made you. I own everything you have. That car, those clothes, even your education. You will learn you can't survive without me. You'll come crawling back when that boyfriend realizes you're not worth the trouble. The courtroom erupted in murmurs and audible gasps. Even the production crew paused, momentarily stunned by the severity of the messages. Richard sat frozen, realizing too late that Emily's careful documentation was a mirror reflecting his controlling, toxic behavior to millions of viewers. Judge Judy's expression, usually neutral and unreadable, hardened. Her voice, calm yet sharp, carried the weight of decades in family court. Mr. Bennett, do you deny sending these messages to your daughter? Richard's jaw tightened. Well, yes, I sent messages, but they were meant to guide her, to remind her of her responsibilities. She's young. She doesn't understand the real world. Judge Judy's lips pressed together in a thin line. She had heard that excuse countless times, and she knew it was a veneer for control disguised as concern. Guidance? Mr. Bennett, these are threats, plain and simple. You've admitted that you view your daughter as dependent upon you, that her autonomy is something to be punished. That is not guidance. That is manipulation. Richard's face reddened, veins pulsing in his temples. He leaned forward, as though proximity to the judge might allow him to reclaim some authority. Your Honor, parenting today requires firmness. Children need to learn respect and boundaries. She is my daughter. I have rights as a parent. Judge Judy's eyes flashed with a fury that silenced the courtroom. Rights as a parent do not include ownership of another human being. You seem to have forgotten that, Mr. Bennett. Emily, emboldened by the judge's support, continued her testimony. She pulled out the next document, the car payment records. Each month's payment, from insurance to registration, was in her name, made by her own hands from her own earnings. I have been paying for this car for 3 years, Emily said, her voice firmer now. It's registered in my name. The insurance is in my name. I saved every receipt. Every payment came from me, not from my father. The courtroom shifted again. The audience murmured, some shaking their heads in disbelief. It was clear that Richard had attempted to weaponize generosity as leverage, and it had been fully exposed. Judge Judy leaned forward, her tone icy. Let me understand this correctly. You gave your daughter a car, told her it was a gift with no strings attached. Then, after she moved out, you claim she owes you $5,000 on top of everything else. Mr. Bennett, what exactly do you think this teaches her? Richard's voice rose in desperation, a fatal flaw in a man used to controlling every narrative. Your Honor, you don't understand. Parenting isn't just about giving things away. It's about teaching accountability and gratitude. These children today, they expect everything without responsibility. She must understand consequences. Respect is not optional. At that moment, the tension in the room reached a breaking point. Judge Judy's eyes narrowed, her voice dropping to a cutting edge. Mr. Bennett, you've spent 19 years treating your daughter like a transaction, a collection of debts and obligations. You do not get to lecture anyone here about respect when you've spent nearly 2 decades gaslighting her, controlling her every move, and attempting to claim ownership over her life. Sit down. Richard's hand twitched toward his folder, perhaps to interject, perhaps to reclaim control. Judge Judy's raised hand froze him in place. The court watched, riveted, as the father who thought he was untouchable began to unravel. Emily's next evidence was a series of cards and letters, meticulously saved since childhood, all containing messages of unconditional love from Richard, without any hint of repayment required. Judge Judy read a snippet aloud. "Emily, you are my daughter. I hope you always follow your dreams. This gift is for you, no conditions." The words echoed in the courtroom. Richard's expression faltered, his facade of composure cracking under the weight of irrefutable proof. Every audience member, every viewer at home, could see the truth. This was not a man attempting to seek justice. It was a man attempting to control, intimidate, and punish. Emily's voice, now steady and resolute, continued. "Your Honor, every text, every demand for money, every attempt to control my life was documented. I saved everything because I knew one day I would need to show the truth. I have nothing against my father, but I cannot be manipulated anymore. I am done being afraid." The courtroom atmosphere shifted palpably. Richard's attempts at intimidation, the same ones that had dictated Emily's life for 19 years, had failed spectacularly in the presence of someone who truly understood manipulation. Judge Judy's stare pierced him, silent but devastating. "Mr. Bennett," she said finally, her voice deliberate and sharp, "you have spent your life trying to own a child. That is not love. That is control disguised as concern. You've built an empire of compliance around her, and now you are surprised that she has chosen independence over fear. You've weaponized every gift, every opportunity, every ounce of your supposed care, and now your control is exposed for the world to see." Richard's hands clenched into fists. The audience could feel the tension crackling through the air like lightning. Emily, for the first time in the proceedings, allowed herself a small, tentative smile. The scales were shifting. Judge Judy turned toward Emily, her tone softening slightly. "Emily, the evidence you've presented is clear, compelling, and undeniable. The documents, messages, and receipts all paint a picture of manipulation and control. This court sees what you endured, and the law sees it too." Richard opened his mouth, ready to protest, but Judge Judy's single glance froze him. The authority in her eyes was absolute. No argument could pierce it. For the first time, Richard realized that the courtroom and the millions watching at home was no longer on his side. The story he had believed he controlled was slipping entirely from his grasp. By the end of part 2, the stage was set. Emily had revealed the first layers of the truth, exposing her father's manipulative tactics, documenting his control, and presenting evidence that shifted the balance entirely. The courtroom was silent, the audience captivated, and Richard Bennett was beginning to grasp, perhaps for the first time, that the authority he had wielded over his daughter for nearly 2 decades was about to be dismantled. Piece by piece, the courtroom was thick with tension. Every eye fixed on the 2 figures at the center of the unfolding storm, Richard Bennett, the father who had once held total control over his daughter's life, and Emily, the young woman finally reclaiming her voice. For the first time since the proceedings began, Richard felt the precariousness of his position. Every shred of authority he thought he wielded was slipping through his fingers like sand. Judge Judy leaned forward, her piercing gaze locking onto Richard with an intensity that made even the hardened corporate executive flinch. "Mr. Bennett," she began, her voice measured yet lethal, "I have listened to your arguments, reviewed the evidence presented by your daughter, and I am astonished by the degree of manipulation and control you've exercised under the guise of parenting. Do you truly believe that demanding repayment for gifts, sending threatening messages, and controlling every aspect of her life constitutes raising a child?" Richard opened his mouth, brimming with indignation, but he faltered under the weight of the courtroom's scrutiny. The audience, already murmuring and whispering among themselves, leaned closer, sensing the monumental shift in power. He tried again. "Your Honor, parenting requires firmness. It requires boundaries. These children today, entitled, spoiled, lacking respect, they must be taught responsibility. I am her father. I have rights. Judge Judy's eyes narrowed, her tone sharp as steel. Rights as a parent do not include ownership of another human being. You seem to confuse control with care, Mr. Bennett. Every gift, every opportunity, every ounce of attention has been weaponized to enforce compliance. That is not guidance. That is tyranny. Richard's knuckles whitened as he gripped the edge of the table. This is outrageous. I've given her everything. Every opportunity, every resource. Judge Judy raised her hand. Do not speak. You have already said enough. The courtroom hushed. Richard's voice had risen, but it was no longer commanding. It trembled with the first real fear he had felt in decades. The irony was undeniable. A man who had controlled every moment of his daughter's life now sat powerless in front of a woman who could see the truth clearly. Emily, emboldened by Judge Judy's support, began to speak again. Your Honor, for 19 years, my life was dictated by my father. Every decision monitored, every friendship scrutinized, every step planned and evaluated. Even gifts came with conditions. I wasn't allowed to fail, to make mistakes, or to think independently. Every achievement was overshadowed by criticism, and every act of rebellion punished with threats and financial control. Her voice, initially fragile, grew stronger with every word. When I moved out, I was accused of betrayal. When I found independence, I was accused of disrespect. Every message, every demand from him was meant to keep me tethered, to ensure I never fully escaped his control. I have been gaslit into believing I was ungrateful when all I sought was freedom. Richard's face had turned a deep red. Sweat gleamed at his temples. The carefully rehearsed arguments he had practiced for weeks evaporated in the face of Emily's unwavering testimony. Every text, every letter, every documented gift she presented chipped away at the empire of control he had built. Judge Judy leaned back slightly, her eyes sweeping the courtroom, ensuring that the gravity of the situation was felt by all present. Mr. Bennett, it is clear to this court that your concept of parenting is rooted in ownership, not love. You have treated your daughter as an investment, demanding a return on gifts that were never loans, attempting to transform affection into obligation. Do you understand the difference between guiding a child and attempting to control one's entire existence? Richard's hands shook as he fumbled with his folder. Your Honor, she needs structure. Respect cannot be taught through leniency. She is my daughter, and I will not allow her to throw away the sacrifices I have made. Judge Judy's expression shifted from neutral to a cold, unyielding stare. Sacrifices do not grant ownership, Mr. Bennett. Providing your child with a home, food, and education is a legal and moral duty, not a bargaining chip. What you have done is manipulate, threaten, and attempt to dominate. You have used love as a weapon. That is not parenting. That is abuse. The audience reacted audibly, a mixture of gasps, murmurs, and incredulous whispers filling the room. Richard's authority, once absolute, had dissolved in the face of undeniable evidence and the unwavering judgment of a woman who had spent decades untangling toxic family dynamics. Emily pulled out her final set of documents. Bank statements proving that every payment for the car had come from her own account. Insurance policies registered in her name, and copies of birthday cards and gifts explicitly labeled with messages like, "No strings attached." Judge Judy held each item, examining them with meticulous attention. She then looked directly at Richard. So, let me get this straight, she said slowly, her voice slicing through the tension like a knife. You gave your daughter a car, told her it had no strings attached, and after she moved out, you demand $5,000 repayment, plus emotional compliance, all because she made her own life choices? Explain that to me, Mr. Bennett. Richard's face contorted, a mixture of rage and desperation. She must learn. These kids today, they have no appreciation, no understanding of responsibility. I did everything for her. I have rights as a parent. I am entitled to... Judge Judy's voice dropped to a dangerous calm. Mr. Bennett, you are not entitled to anything beyond what the law and morality demand. You are not her owner, you are not her master, and your attempts to assert dominance over a grown woman are nothing short of emotional abuse. For the first time, Richard's facade cracked entirely. He stood abruptly, pointing at Judge Judy with the same threatening posture he had used on Emily for years. Your Honor, you don't understand. These children need boundaries. They need respect for authority. She is my daughter, and she must obey me. The courtroom held its collective breath. Gasps and murmurs echoed around the chamber. This outburst, meant to intimidate, only reinforced the perception that Richard had spent years weaponizing control. Judge Judy's eyes narrowed to icy slits. Sit down, Mr. Bennett, she commanded, her voice carrying the full force of authority. You will not speak again unless directly addressed. You have already revealed the entirety of your character. Your threats, manipulations, and twisted sense of entitlement have been fully exposed. Sit down. Richard collapsed back into his chair, seething, his world visibly unraveling. The power he had clung to for nearly 20 years evaporated under the combined force of truth and authority. Emily, trembling but resolute, felt a weight lift as she realized the truth of her freedom was now recognized in the highest authority of the courtroom. Judge Judy turned back to Emily, her expression softening slightly. Emily, you have endured manipulation, control, and gaslighting for far too long. Today, this court acknowledges your courage and your right to autonomy. You are not responsible for your father's sense of entitlement, nor are you obliged to repay gifts, emotional or material, that were never loans. Richard slumped further, his face pale and rigid. The audience erupted in quiet applause, not out of celebration for a courtroom drama, but out of recognition of a young woman finally standing against years of abuse. Emily's shoulders, once tense and trembling, relaxed slightly as a sense of justice began to settle in. Judge Judy's voice carried over the murmurs. Mr. Bennett, understand this. Control is not parenting. Ownership is not love. You have failed as a father because you treated your daughter as property instead of a human being. And until you recognize that, you will never have a real relationship with her. Richard's mouth opened, then closed. For the first time, he had no retort, no control, no authority. The courtroom, the cameras, and the millions watching at home had witnessed the complete collapse of a man who had believed he could own another person's life. Asterisk, the courtroom was electric. Every seat occupied, every eye fixed on Judge Judy, Emily, and Richard Bennett. Richard, once so confident, now sat slumped, jaw tight, hands clenched. Every passing moment seemed to strip away what remained of his control, leaving him exposed to the judgment of the court, the audience, and millions of viewers watching at home. Judge Judy leaned forward, steepling her fingers, her voice calm but razor sharp. Mr. Bennett, I have listened carefully to your testimony, examined all the evidence, and observed your conduct throughout these proceedings. What is clear is that you have confused obedience with love and control with responsibility. You have weaponized gifts, manipulated circumstances, and attempted to dominate the life of someone who is not yours to own. Richard's face reddened further. Your Honor, I have only tried to guide her, to teach her respect. These kids today, they don't understand authority. Judge Judy's eyes bore into him like steel. Authority is not ownership. Control is not guidance. You have spent nearly 2 decades turning care into coercion, and that is not parenting. That is abuse. Emily, sitting quietly in her chair, felt a surge of vindication. After years of being silenced, belittled, and threatened, the authority she had feared her entire life was now fully on her side. She took a deep breath, steadying herself, and added, Your Honor, I've kept every text, every card, every record. My father tried to convince me that I owed him for everything he gave me, that independence was disobedience. But all of this is documented. Gifts were gifts. Love was never a transaction. I've just wanted to live my life without fear. Judge Judy nodded, her gaze softening toward Emily, acknowledging the courage it took to speak these truths aloud in a courtroom filled with strangers and cameras. She turned back to Richard, her tone unyielding. Mr. Bennett, your actions have caused your daughter emotional distress. Your attempts to retroactively convert gifts into debts, your threats, and the meticulous monitoring of her life were manipulative, controlling, and abusive. This court will not sanction such behavior. nor will it allow a parent to attempt to punish a child for choosing independence. Richard's hands gripped the armrests of his chair. He opened his mouth, perhaps to protest, perhaps to reclaim some shred of dignity. But Judge Judy's next words froze him in place. "Mr. Bennett," she continued, "this court has reviewed every document, every text, every piece of evidence presented by Emily. The cards you sent, the gifts you provided, were all given freely, without conditions. To attempt to convert them into loans or debts after she moved out is not only absurd, but a form of financial manipulation intended to instill fear and guilt." Richard's face contorted with frustration, his voice rising despite his own disbelief. "Your Honor, you don't understand. Parenting today is hard. Children lack discipline. They don't appreciate what they are given. She must learn consequences." Judge Judy's eyes flashed, cutting him down with the calm precision of someone who had seen every variation of this argument countless times before. "Mr. Bennett, what you call consequences are, in fact, punishments designed to assert control over your adult daughter. You are not allowed to dictate her life or coerce her with threats of financial ruin. You have failed in your duty as a parent, and the law recognizes that." Emily leaned forward slightly, emboldened. "Your Honor, I've done everything asked of me. I paid for the car, managed my own finances, and worked 2 jobs while attending college. I have never refused responsibility. I just wanted to be treated as a person, not property." Judge Judy nodded gravely. "And that, Emily, is the most important point. Responsibility is earned through trust and guidance, not enforced fear and manipulation. You have demonstrated accountability every step of the way. Your father has attempted to coerce, intimidate, and punish, but you have remained steadfast. The law and justice are on your side." Richard's fists clenched tighter. His eyes darted around the courtroom, perhaps hoping anyone would intervene. But the shift in power was complete. The audience, previously quiet and tense, now murmured in agreement, many nodding and whispering about the astonishing courage Emily had shown. The production crew, the staff, and viewers at home were witnessing the public dismantling of a man who had long believed he was untouchable. Judge Judy rose slightly from her bench, her voice firm and resolute. "Mr. Bennett, this court rules as follows. The claims for repayment of gifts totaling $15,000 are dismissed. The car belongs to Emily. She has been making the payments, and it is registered in her name. You have no legal claim over it, and no retroactive debts can be imposed. Furthermore, Emily is awarded $5,000 in compensation for emotional distress caused by your actions, including the threats, harassment, and the attempts to intimidate her into compliance." The courtroom erupted in murmurs and gasps. Emily's eyes filled with tears, but this time, they were tears of relief and triumph, not fear. She had been heard, validated, and protected. Richard sat frozen, his confidence shattered, his authority extinguished in front of the nation. Judge Judy continued, her voice carrying the weight of decades of experience and moral clarity. "Let this be a lesson, Mr. Bennett. Parenting is not about ownership, manipulation, or control. Parenting is about nurturing, guiding, and supporting your child while respecting their autonomy. You have failed in every one of these aspects. Until you recognize and address your abusive behaviors, you will never have a real relationship with your daughter." Richard tried once more to speak, his voice breaking with frustration and anger. "Your Honor, I only wanted..." Judge Judy's eyes bore into him. "You will not speak again unless directly addressed. Your words have revealed enough. Sit down." Richard collapsed back into his chair, defeated. Emily exhaled slowly, allowing the tension that had gripped her for nearly 2 decades to ease. Judge Judy turned back to her, her tone softening for the first time. "Emily, you are free. You owe your father nothing. Your independence, your life, and your choices are yours alone. You have the right to live without fear, guilt, or manipulation. Never let anyone, even a parent, tell you otherwise." The courtroom erupted in applause, the audience standing to honor Emily's courage and resilience. Even the cameras, which had captured countless dramatic confrontations, seemed to pause in recognition of the gravity of the moment. Richard Bennett sat slumped, humiliated, his world collapsing around him. The man who had believed he could control every aspect of his daughter's life had been dismantled publicly, his reputation irreparably damaged. Every threatening message, every attempt at coercion, every act of manipulation was now part of the public record. A cautionary tale of what happens when control masquerades as love. Emily, still trembling, was approached by Judge Judy. Words were exchanged quietly, unseen by the cameras, but their effect was profound. Emily's shoulders relaxed further, her smile emerging genuine, unforced, and free. Outside the courtroom, the ripple effect of the case was immediate. Clips from the trial went viral within hours. Millions of people shared Emily's story, sparking conversations about toxic parenting, emotional abuse, and the importance of autonomy and boundaries. Support networks for adult children of narcissistic parents cited her case as a beacon of courage, and mental health professionals used it as a teaching moment in therapy and counseling sessions. Nationwide. Richard Bennett's life, once carefully constructed to display power and control, began to unravel. His company questioned his leadership, his family distanced themselves, and the public exposure of his abusive behavior left him with few allies. Meanwhile, Emily's story became an inspiration, a testament to bravery, resilience, and the power of truth. By the end of Part 4, the courtroom drama had reached its climax. Emily had reclaimed her life, Judge Judy had delivered a decisive and moral ruling, and Richard Bennett had been publicly exposed, stripped of the authority he had long wielded. The stage was now set for Part 5, where the aftermath, social impact, and Emily's journey toward empowerment and healing will unfold. The courtroom had emptied, the echo of Judge Judy's gavel still ringing in the minds of everyone present. Outside, the world was already responding. Social media erupted within hours of the episode airing, with clips from the trial going viral on every platform. Millions of people watched Emily stand up to the man who had dominated her life for nearly 2 decades. The hashtag Defender trended worldwide for days. Stories, think pieces, and viral commentary exploded across the internet, dissecting the case and the audacity of a young woman daring to assert her autonomy. Emily, still processing the intensity of the day, stepped outside the courthouse into the crisp morning air. The relief was almost tangible, but so was the weight of what had just happened. She had faced her father in front of the nation and survived, reclaiming not just her independence, but also her sense of self. The fear that had haunted her for years began to dissipate with every passing moment. She was free. Within hours, messages poured in from strangers around the world. Many shared their own experiences with controlling or narcissistic parents. Some admitted they had never dared speak up, while others said they now felt empowered to set boundaries they had long feared enforcing. Mental health professionals began using the clips in seminars and therapy sessions to teach recognition of emotional abuse and coercive control. Adult children of narcissistic parents found validation and hope in Emily's courage. Meanwhile, Richard Bennett's carefully constructed life began to unravel. His company, already aware of his controlling tendencies, received countless complaints from employees referencing the viral courtroom footage. Within days, he was asked to resign from his executive position. His extended family, who had previously ignored Emily's complaints, finally saw the man they thought of as a patriarch for what he truly was, a manipulator hiding behind the facade of care. Social circles that had once admired his authority now whispered, avoided, and distanced themselves. He had become, almost overnight, a cautionary tale of toxic parenting. Emily, however, refused to let the media frenzy define her. She returned to her small apartment, surrounded by the freedom she had fought for, and slowly began rebuilding her life on her terms. College became a sanctuary, a place where she could focus on her ambitions without fear of constant surveillance or criticism. Jake, her boyfriend, remained a steady source of support, helping her navigate the emotional aftermath of publicly confronting a parent who had controlled her existence. The GoFundMe, set up by strangers who admired Emily's courage, exploded with support. Donations poured in from people moved by her story, determined to help her pursue her education and independence. In total, over $180,000 was raised. Emily, true to her nature, accepted only enough to cover her tuition and living expenses, donating the remainder to organizations supporting young adults escaping abusive family situations. She wanted others to have the same opportunity she had fought so hard to claim. Emily also started a blog, documenting her experience and offering guidance to others in similar situations. Her posts were honest, raw, and empowering. She shared stories of manipulation, gaslighting, and coercive control, but she also provided strategies for setting boundaries, seeking help, and reclaiming personal freedom. Thousands of readers reached out, expressing gratitude and sharing their own journeys. Emily's voice became not just a symbol of resistance, but a practical resource for anyone navigating the complex and often invisible dynamics of toxic family relationships. Richard Bennett, on the other hand, struggled to process the fallout. The man who had once prided himself on control, dominance, and respect found himself stripped of authority, mocked online, and legally defeated. He attempted to contact Emily after the ruling, but she, guided by both counsel and newfound personal boundaries, refused to engage. Every outreach, every message, only reinforced the lesson that Judge Judy had made painfully clear in the courtroom. Emily was not property, and control over another human being was never the measure of love. The public impact of the case extended far beyond the Bennett family. Parenting forums, online support groups, and mental health communities referenced the viral episode for years to come. Discussions about the difference between discipline and coercion, guidance and manipulation became mainstream. Emily's story was cited as an example of how courage, evidence, and the willingness to assert personal boundaries could challenge even the most controlling and manipulative individuals. 6 months later, Emily's life had transformed completely. She continued her studies in community college, thriving academically and socially, free from the constant shadow of her father. She and Jake had moved into a small apartment of their own, a safe space where trust, respect, and mutual support defined their relationship. Financial independence, once a distant dream under her father's control, was now fully within her grasp. Emily's relationship with her father remained severed, but this absence, while painful, was also liberating. She no longer needed approval to validate her existence or choices. The empowerment she gained from standing up to him radiated into every aspect of her life: academics, friendships, and personal growth. Every decision was now hers alone, guided by reason, self-respect, and the knowledge that freedom was not just a privilege, but a right. Judge Judy's words continued to resonate in Emily's mind. You do not owe lifelong obedience for fulfilling the basic obligations of parenting. You are free to live your life, to set boundaries, and to demand respect. These words were more than a ruling. They became a mantra, a shield against the lingering guilt that often accompanies estrangement from a parent. Meanwhile, the episode remained a cultural touchstone. Clips were used in schools and therapy workshops to educate people on recognizing emotional abuse and narcissistic control. Social media posts analyzing the case continued to circulate, with millions of viewers dissecting every moment of the courtroom confrontation. Emily's bravery became a beacon for those struggling with similar issues, providing hope that change was possible, and that asserting personal boundaries was both necessary and justified. For Emily, the most profound victory was internal. Beyond the money, beyond the social media attention, beyond the dismissal of the lawsuit, she had reclaimed her life. She no longer flinched at her father's name, no longer felt the weight of his judgment, and no longer allowed fear to dictate her choices. Each day was a testament to her strength, resilience, and the courage it took to confront someone who had dominated her life for far too long. In the end, the story of Emily Bennett was not just about a courtroom battle or a viral episode. It was about reclaiming autonomy, asserting boundaries, and redefining what it meant to live free from manipulation. The case became a symbol of hope for countless others, a reminder that courage, evidence, and truth could dismantle even the most deeply entrenched forms of control. And as Emily walked across her campus that morning, sunlight sculling across the buildings, she smiled genuinely for the first time in years. Every step was hers alone, guided by choice, independence, and a newfound understanding of what true freedom and true love really look like. The gavel had come down, justice had been served, and Emily Bennett's life was finally her own.